Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The sound of crashing dishes echoed through the two-story house in Stamford, Connecticut, followed by Diana Thompson's high-pitched scream. "I can't take it anymore, I'm not his mother, and I never will be." Cameron Marshall watched paralyzed as his wife of 5 years threw her wedding ring in his direction, missing by a few centimeters. "Please, Diana, let's talk about this." Cameron tried to calm the situation, aware that their 80-year-old son Lucas was upstairs, probably curled up in his bed, as he always did during these increasingly frequent arguments. "Talk after 5 years of trying to be the perfect stepmother to a boy who only talks about his dead mother, who refuses to give me a chance." Diana ran her hands through her perfectly tidy hair, her face red with anger. "Do you know how many times he's called me mother? Not one. And do you know why? Because you never encouraged it." Cameron felt the familiar weight of guilt on his shoulders. He had married Diana just 2 years after the death of his first wife, Rebecca, from aggressive cancer. At the time, it seemed like the right decision. Lucas needed a mother figure, and Diana seemed so loving, so understanding. But over the years, the mask fell away. Diana never really connected with Lucas, maintaining an emotional distance that only grew with time. She turned every failed attempt to get closer into bitterness, every moment of silence into resentment. "I'm going to spend the night at my sister's," Diana announced, already pulling her suitcase out of the hall closet. "Don't look for me. My lawyer will be in touch." When the doors slammed, the silence that followed was deafening. Cameron climbed the stairs slowly, his heart heavy. As expected, he found Lucas curled up on his bed, hugging the old teddy bear Rebecca had given him last Christmas. "Hey, champ." Cameron sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking his son's brown hair. "It's okay." Lucas raised his blue eyes, identical to those of his deceased mother. "Is Diana leaving for real this time?" Cameron hesitated but nodded. "Yes, son. I think so." To his surprise, Lucas seemed to relax. "I'm sorry, Dad. I tried to like her, but she never looked at me the way Mom did." The innocent comment hit Cameron like a punch in the gut. His 80-year-old son had realized something that he, in his haste to rebuild a normal family, had ignored. Love can't be forced or rushed. The next morning, Cameron took Lucas to school as usual. Stamford Elementary School was a welcoming red brick building with a colorful playground where children were already playing despite the early start time. "Good morning, Mr. Marshall." "Good morning, Lucas." The cheerful voice belonged to Natalie Rodriguez, Lucas's new teacher. At 29, she had the kind of presence that naturally attracted children, warm, genuine, and kind. Her long dark hair was tied up in a casual ponytail, and her sincere smile lit up the whole room. "Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez," Lucas replied, and Cameron noticed something different in his tone and animation he hadn't heard in a long time. "Lucas, did you bring your dinosaur project? I can't wait to see it." Natalie bent down to meet the boy, her brown eyes shining with genuine interest. "Yes, I made a Trex out of cardboard and paint." Lucas opened his backpack, eager to show off his creation. Cameron watched the interaction with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Since Natalie had become Lucas' teacher 3 months ago, her son had become more communicative, more engaged in school. It was as if she had found a key to a lock that even Cameron didn't know existed. "Mr. Marshall," Natalie called after Lucas ran inside with his friends. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Cameron nodded, noticing for the first time how her eyes had little golden flecks in them when they caught the morning light. "Lucas has been a bit distracted over the last few weeks," she began, her voice soft but professional. "Today I noticed that he seems lighter. Has something happened?" The genuine concern in her voice touched Cameron. "Diana, my wife, ex-wife, now left us last night." "Oh," Natalie bit her lip, clearly choosing her next words carefully. "I'm so sorry. It must be hard for both of you." Actually, Cameron was surprised by his own honesty. "I think it's a relief for both of us. I should never have married her, not so soon after losing Rebecca." Natalie nodded understandingly. "Sometimes the decisions we make with the good of others in mind end up not being the best for anyone. The important thing is that you two have each other." A bell rang in the distance, signaling the start of classes. Natalie smiled apologetically. "I have to go. But Mr. Marshall, Lucas is an amazing boy, and you're doing a great job with him." As Cameron drove to his architectural office in downtown Stamford, Natalie's words echoed in his mind. For the first time in a long time, he felt a small flame of hope ignite in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, the end of his marriage to Diana wasn't a failure, but the first step towards something truer, more genuine. What he didn't know was that that brief conversation in the schoolyard would be the beginning of a journey that would change not only his life, but also that of his son in ways he could never have imagined. 2 weeks after Diana's departure, Cameron watched Lucas playing in the school playground after school. It was a sunny Friday, and he had left work early to pick up his son. The boy ran around and laughed with other pupils while Natalie supervised the remaining children. "He's adjusting well," Natalie commented, approaching Cameron. "In fact, I've noticed a significant improvement in his behavior since..." "Well, you know," Cameron nodded, feeling a twinge of guilt. "Sometimes I wonder if I was selfish to try to replace Rebecca so quickly." "Don't be so hard on yourself," Natalie replied, her eyes following Lucas as he climbed the slide. "You do what you thought was best at the time. The important thing is that now you're realizing what really works for both of you." A soccer ball rolled to his feet, and Lucas came running to pick it up. "Dad, can I stay for another 5 minutes, please?" "Sure, champ. But only 5, okay? We have to stop at the supermarket before we go home." "Mr. Marshall," Natalie hesitated for a moment. "We're organizing a science fair next month. Lucas is super excited about his project on dinosaurs, but some parents usually help with the organization. If you're interested..." Of course, the answer came faster than Cameron had intended. "I mean, it would be great to be able to help." Natalie's smile lit up her face. "Perfect, we have a meeting next Tuesday after school. If you can come, I'll be here," Cameron promised, trying to ignore the warmth he felt in his chest when he saw how her eyes sparkled when she smiled. At the supermarket, Lucas was unusually talkative, sharing details about his day at school. "Ms. Rodriguez said my velociraptor drawing was so good it should be in a museum," Cameron smiled, pushing the trolley down the cereal aisle. "She seems like a very special teacher." "She's the best," Lucas declared with conviction. "Did you know that she also lost her mother when she was little? She told me about it when she saw me looking sadly at the picture of Mom in my notebook." Cameron stopped, surprised by this information. It explained the natural way Natalie dealt with Lucas and his loss. On the day of the science fair meeting, Cameron arrived at school on time at 4 p.m. Natalie's classroom had a welcoming atmosphere, with students' work decorating the walls and small plants on the windowsills. Other parents were already present, and Natalie coordinated the meeting with a perfect blend of professionalism and casualness. Cameron found himself admiring the way she managed to make everyone feel included and valued. "Mr. Marshall, could you stay for a moment?" Natalie asked after the meeting when the other parents had already left. "Of course," he replied, noticing how the late afternoon light created golden shadows on her face. "Lucas showed me some old photos today," she began softly. "Pictures with Rebecca. He seemed to need to talk about her." Cameron felt a lump in his throat. "He rarely talks about her at home. I think he's trying to protect me." "Children are like that," Natalie smiled gently. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't so close to the pain. You know, when I lost my mother when I was 6, my teacher at the time was my biggest support." "Lucas mentioned that you'd been through something similar," Cameron said softly. "Yes," she confirmed, organizing some papers on her desk. "Maybe that's why I understand a little of what he's going through. The pain never goes away completely, but we learn to turn it into something different, something that makes us stronger." At that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a look that lasted a second longer, a silence filled with mutual understanding. "Natalie," Cameron began, surprising himself by using her first name, "would you like to have coffee sometime to talk about Lucas?" "Of course." A slight blush tinged her cheeks. "Would that be appropriate?" "Probably not," he admitted with a small smile. "But sometimes the best decisions aren't necessarily the most appropriate." Natalie laughed softly. "Saturday, I know a great coffee shop downtown." When Cameron arrived home that evening, he found Lucas drawing at the kitchen table. "Dad, look, I've drawn a picture of our family." On the paper, 3 smiling figures: Lucas, Cameron, and surprisingly Natalie, all in front of a Trex. "It's for the science fair project," Lucas explained, not realizing the impact his innocent drawing had made on his father. "Miss Rodriguez will love it." Cameron stared at the drawing, feeling a mixture of emotions he couldn't name. Perhaps his son, in his childlike wisdom, was seeing something that he himself was beginning to realize, that sometimes fate has surprising ways of rebuilding broken families. The Woodland Coffee Shop was a cozy establishment in the heart of Stamford with large windows that let in the golden autumn light. Cameron arrived a few minutes before the agreed time, choosing a discreet table in the corner. His hands were slightly shaky as he checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "Sorry I'm late." Natalie emerged, her loose hair framing her flush face in the cold October wind. "I had to sort out a little family drama. My cat decided to destroy my only presentable pair of shoes." Cameron laughed, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease instantly. Natalie was wearing jeans, a burgundy sweater, and boots, a much more casual version of the professional teacher he was used to seeing. "Lucas stayed with my sister Rachel," Cameron explained as Natalie settled in. "They have a Saturday morning ritual of watching cartoons and eating pancakes with lots of syrup." "That's adorable," Natalie smiled, picking up the menu. "Lucas talks a lot about Aunt Rachel in class. It seems she's a great ally. She's been amazing, especially since—" Cameron hesitated, but Natalie finished softly. "Since Rebecca." "Yes," he nodded, grateful for the direct but gentle way she approached the subject. "Rachel was her best friend at college. That's how I met Rebecca, actually." The waitress approached to take their orders, a cappuccino for Natalie and an Americano for Cameron, as well as a slice of carrot cake to share. "Tell me about her," Natalie asked after the waitress walked away. Seeing the surprise on Cameron's face, she elaborated, "Lucas has so many beautiful memories, but sometimes it feels like he needs permission to share them." Cameron took a deep breath, realizing that it was the first time in years that someone had shown genuine interest in hearing about Rebecca without that look of pity or discomfort. "Rebecca was light," he began, the words flowing naturally. "She was a music teacher in high school. She had this incredible ability to find hidden talents in students that no one else noticed. When she found out about the cancer, her biggest worry was that Lucas, only 3 years old, wouldn't remember her singing." "So the videos," Natalie murmured, remembering something Lucas had mentioned. "Yes," Cameron confirmed, surprised. "She recorded dozens of videos, singing children's psalms, telling stories. I wanted Lucas to have something to remember her by besides the photos." The waitress returned with their orders, creating a natural pause in the conversation. When she walked away, Natalie took a sip of her cappuccino before speaking. "Losing my mother when I was 6 was like having a hole in your chest that nothing seemed to fill. My father, well-meaning as he was, trying to protect me from the pain so much that he ended up making it a taboo subject. It took me years to understand that talking about her, keeping her memory alive, didn't mean I was stuck in the past." "That's exactly it," Cameron agreed, feeling a deep connection with her words. "With Diana, I made the opposite mistake. I tried to force a replacement that would never work. Lucas deserved better than that." "He is better than that," Natalie stated with conviction. "He has a father who loves him unconditionally and is willing to learn and grow for him. That's more valuable than any forced attempt to create a perfect family." The carrot cake remained untouched between them as the conversation flowed naturally from one subject to another. Soon they were sharing childhood stories, professional dreams, and little confessions. "So you wanted to be an astronaut?" Natalie laughed, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Hey, it was a perfectly valid dream for a 10-year-old, Cameron defended himself, feigning indignation. "I ended up discovering that I preferred designing buildings to spaceships." "And now you design schools and hospitals," she observed. "You're still building spaces that make a difference to people's lives." Cameron felt his heart race at the way she could see beyond the superficial. Time passed unnoticed until Natalie's cell phone vibrated with a message. "Oh my God, it's almost 11 o'clock, she exclaimed in surprise. "I promised to help my friend Julie with her baby shower preparations this afternoon." As they left the cafe, the cold October air enveloped them. Cameron noticed Natalie shiver slightly and without thinking offered her his coat. "No need," she smiled, but her eyes betrayed a glint of appreciation for the gesture. "Natalie," Cameron began, gathering his courage. "I know this is complicated with you being Lucas's teacher and all, but," she encouraged softly, taking a step towards him. "But I'd love to do it again. Maybe dinner next time." Her smile lit up her whole face. "I'd love to, but let's take it slow, okay? For Lucas?" "For Lucas," he agreed, although they both knew there was much more at stake than just concern for the boy. As they drove back to pick up Lucas, Cameron couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, his heart felt light, full of possibilities. What had begun as a simple conversation about his son had turned into something much more meaningful, a connection that promised to heal not only the present, but also to make peace with the past. At home, Lucas welcomed him with a tight hug and a new story about dinosaurs. As he listened to his son talk animatedly about pterodactyls, Cameron realized that perhaps the true meaning of family was not in trying to recreate what was lost, but in being open to the new forms of love that life offers when we least expect it. Autumn leaves danced across the Stanford Elementary School courtyard as Cameron watched Lucas present his dinosaur project at the science fair. The boy gesticulated animatedly, explaining the different characteristics of the Tyrannosaurus Rex to a group of impressed parents. Natalie was a few meters ahead, supervising another group of students, but their gazes occasionally met, exchanging discreet smiles. 3 weeks had passed since the coffee, and they had met twice more, always with excuses related to school or Lucas. The promised dinner hadn't happened yet, but the growing tension between them was almost palpable. "Dad," Ms. Rodriguez said, "my project can go to the regional fair." Lucas ran up to him, his eyes shining with excitement. "That's amazing, champ." Cameron hugged his son, feeling his heart expand with pride. Rachel approached them, carrying her professional camera. As a photographer, she had offered to document the event. "Lucas, how about a photo with your dad and your teacher for the school album?" Before Cameron could protest, Lucas was already calling Natalie. She approached nervously, adjusting her navy blue dress. Altogether, Rachel instructed, and Cameron felt a chill as his arm brushed lightly against Natalie's as they got into position. "Perfect, now smile." The flash went off several times, and Rachel smiled with satisfaction as she checked the photos. Her smile, however, froze for a moment. "All right, Ratch?" Cameron asked, and noticing her expression. "Yeah, it's just," she hesitated, looking from Cameron to Natalie. "Nothing. We'll talk later." The rest of the fair went without incident, but Cameron couldn't stop thinking about his sister's strange reaction. When the event ended and Lucas went home with Rachel for their traditional Saturday movie night, he found Natalie putting away the last of the materials. "Do you need any help?" "Always," she smiled, handing him a box of materials. "The storage room is at the end of the corridor." As they walked side by side, the silence between them was laden with unspoken words. In the dimly lit storeroom, Cameron placed the box on a shelf and turned to find Natalie standing very close. "Cameron," she began, her voice low, "we need to talk about this, about us." "I know," he replied, aware of every inch of the space between them. "Rachel saw something in the photos today, didn't she?" Natalie nodded slowly. "The way we look at each other, it's not something we can hide for long. And that's bad, it's complicated," she sighed. "I'm Lucas's teacher. There are protocols, expectations. And there's what we feel," Cameron added softly, taking a step towards her. The moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor. They moved away quickly as Principal Harrison came through the storage room door. "Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Marshall, excellent work at the fair today. Lucas certainly has a talent for science." After the principal left, Natalie and Cameron looked at each other, a nervous laugh escaping them both. "Dinner," Cameron said suddenly. "Tomorrow night. Not as teacher and parent, not as friends discussing progress reports. Just us." "Cameron, please," he insisted gently. "We need to be honest about this." Natalie bit her lip thoughtfully before nodding. "Okay, tomorrow night." Later at Rachel's house, Cameron found his sister in the kitchen after Lucas had gone to bed. "Show me the photos," he asked without preamble. Rachel connected the camera to her laptop and opened a sequence of images. Most of them looked perfectly normal: teacher, student, and parent at the science fair. But there was one captured between the official flashes that told a different story. It was a spontaneous moment. Natalie looked at Cameron with a soft smile, her eyes brimming with something unmistakable, while he looked at her with equal intensity. "Remember that picture?" Rachel slid another picture across the table, an old one from 15 years ago, showing Cameron and Rebecca on their first date. The resemblance was striking, not in physical appearance, but in the energy captured, the connection evident between two people discovering something precious and frightening at the same time. "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty," Rachel said softly. "Rebecca always wanted you to be happy again. But you ought to be careful. For Lucas." "I know," Cameron ran his hands over his face. "But Ratch, for the first time since Rebecca, I feel like I can breathe completely again." When I'm with Natalie, it's not like I'm trying to fill a void or replace someone. It's different, new, and Lucas, he adores her. Have you seen his drawing to one of our family with the Treks? Rachel smiled. I did, and that's why you need to do this right. No rush, no pressure. If this is real, it will happen naturally. The next day, preparing for dinner, Cameron felt a mixture of anxiety and hope that he hadn't experienced for years. He knew there was a lot at stake: Lucas' well-being, Natalie's career, the complexities of starting a new relationship after a profound loss. But as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, he remembered Rebecca's words in her last video to Lucas: "Love, darling, is never something to be afraid of. It comes in different forms at unexpected times, but it always makes us stronger, more complete." Perhaps Cameron thought it was time to be truly brave and allow his heart to open again, not just for him, but for everyone involved. Bella Luna, a small Italian restaurant in the historic center of Stamford, was welcoming that Sunday evening. Cameron arrived a few minutes before the agreed time, his heart racing as he saw Natalie already waiting at the entrance. She was wearing a simple but elegant emerald green dress, her loose hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said softly, approaching her. "Thank you," she smiled, a slight blush tinging her cheeks. "You don't look bad yourself." The maitre d' led them to a discreet table at the back of the restaurant next to a window that overlooked a small, brightly lit garden. The nervousness between them was palpable as they studied the menus in silence. "So," Natalie began after they had placed their orders, "I think we need to talk about that photo." "Did Rachel show it to you?" "She didn't have to," she replied, playing with the edge of her napkin. "I saw the moment happening. It's funny how a split second captured can reveal so much." Cameron took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Natalie, I know this is a complicated situation. You're Lucas's teacher. I've just come out of a divorce, and there's a whole story with Rebecca that—" "Cameron," she interrupted him, gently reaching across the table to touch his hand. "It's not just these practical issues that worry me. It's Lucas. In just a few months, I've built up a special relationship with him as his teacher. If something goes wrong between us, you're afraid of hurting him," Cameron added, understanding. "Exactly. He's already lost so much, been through so many changes. What if it doesn't work out? What if he gets attached?" And then the waiter arrived with the wine they had ordered, creating a natural pause in the conversation. After the glasses were poured, Cameron leaned forward slightly. "Can I tell you something about Lucas, something that happened last night?" Natalie nodded, curious. Rachel was showing him old photos, including some of Rebecca. "In one of them, we were all on a picnic in the park." Lucas looked at the photo for a long time and said, "You know, Dad, sometimes I get sad because I can't remember exactly what Mom's singing voice sounded like, even with the videos. But when Ms. Rodriguez reads stories in class, using different voices for each character, I feel safe like I did with Mom." Tears glistened in Natalie's eyes. He said that yes. And you know what? He's not looking for a replacement for Rebecca. None of us are. He's just discovering that his heart has room for different kinds of love. Dinner arrived, and they ate in contemplative silence for a few minutes before Natalie spoke again. "In college, my advisor told me something I've never forgotten. She said that sometimes the universe puts people in our lives not to fill voids, but to create new spaces of love." "And what do you think of that?" Cameron asked softly. "I think I'm creating a new space," she replied, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart soar. The rest of dinner flowed naturally with conversations about their lives, dreams, and fears. Natalie told of her desire to open an alternative school one day focused on children with special needs. Cameron shared his social architecture projects, including a community center he was developing. As they left the restaurant, the cold October air enveloped them. Cameron noticed Natalie shivering slightly, and this time she accepted his coat without hesitation. "There's a 24-hour cafe around the corner," he suggested, reluctant to call it a night. "Could we have a hot chocolate?" "Better not," she smiled sadly. "Tomorrow I have a meeting with Principal Harrison at 7 a.m. But," she hesitated for a moment, "maybe we could talk to her about our situation officially." Cameron's heart leapt. Do you want to try, even with all the complications?" "I want to do it the right way," she replied, taking a step towards him. "For Lucas, for us, for everyone involved." Under the soft light of the street lamps, with autumn leaves dancing around them, Cameron leaned in slowly. His lips met Natalie's in a soft kiss full of promise and possibility. When they parted, Natalie rested her forehead against his for a moment. Let's take it slow, okay? One day at a time, he agreed. On the way home, Cameron couldn't stop smiling. He sent a quick message to Rachel. You were right. Some things just have to happen naturally. In his bed, before going to sleep, he looked at the picture of Rebecca on his bedside table. I think you'd approve, he whispered. You always said that love finds a way. The soft sound of rain starting to fall created a perfect melody for his thoughts about new beginnings and second chances. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Cameron was genuinely looking forward to the future. A week after dinner at Bella Luna, Diana Thompson appeared unexpectedly at the school gate, her high heels tapping determinedly against the linoleum floor. Lucas was presenting his dinosaur project to a neighboring school when she entered Natalie's classroom. So it's you, Diana declared, her eyes studying Natalie with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. The teacher who's getting involved with my husband? Ex-husband, Natalie corrected, gently maintaining her professional composure as she guided Diana out of the room away from the students' prying eyes. And this is not an appropriate conversation for us to be having here. Oh, so now you care about what's appropriate, Diana laughed humorlessly. Rachel showed me the photos from the science fair. I must admit you're more subtle than I expected. Natalie felt her heart racing, but kept her voice calm. Mrs. Thompson, I respect your history with Cameron and Lucas, but no you don't, Diana interrupted. If you did, you wouldn't be taking advantage of the vulnerability of a recently divorced man and his impressionable son. Principal Harrison, attracted by the commotion in the corridor, approached quickly. Is there a problem, ladies? Actually, Diana smiled artificially. I'm just expressing my concern about the inappropriate relationship between a teacher and the father of a student. The silence that followed was deafening. Principal Harrison looked from Diana to Natalie, her expression unreadable. Ms. Rodriguez, would you please escort me to my office? Ms. Thompson, I appreciate your concern. We'll deal with it internally. As Natalie followed the principal, her cell phone vibrated with a message from Cameron. Lucas told me about Diana. I'm on my way. In the principal's office, Natalie sat rigidly, her hands shaking slightly. Mrs. Harrison, may I explain? Natalie, the principal interrupted her gently. I've worked in education for 30 years. It's not the first time I've seen something like this happen, and it probably won't be the last. I know I should have come and talked to you first, Natalie began, but was interrupted by knocks on the door. Cameron entered looking both worried and determined. Mrs. Harrison, I need to clarify something. Natalie and I... Please, Mr. Marshall, sit down. The principal gestured to the chair next to Natalie. First, I want to make it clear that we are not in a courtroom. Ms. Rodriguez is one of the best teachers I've ever had, and Lucas' progress under her guidance is remarkable. But Natalie asked, sensing that there was more to come. But I need to protect everyone involved. You too, Lucas, the school, the principal explained. I suggest that Lucas be transferred to Miss Bennett's classroom for the rest of the school year. That will give us time to deal with the situation properly. No, Cameron said firmly. Lucas is finally thriving. I'm not going to rip him away from an environment where he feels safe and understood. Mr. Marshall, the principal leaned forward. I understand your position, but think of everyone's well-being, including Ms. Rodriguez's. Natalie felt the tears burn in her eyes. She's right, Cameron. We need to do this right. Before Cameron could reply, the door opened again. Rachel walked in, followed by Lucas. Sorry to interrupt, Rachel said, but I think everyone needs to hear something. Lucas, holding his dinosaur project, looked at the adults in the room. I heard Diana talking badly about Ms. Rodriguez. But she's wrong. Ms. Rodriguez helped me understand that it's okay to miss my mother and still like other people too. The silence that followed was broken by Principal Harrison. Lucas, would you feel uncomfortable if your father and Ms. Rodriguez were friends? They're already friends, Lucas replied with the simplicity of childlike innocence. And that makes me happy. Mom always said that love multiplies, not divides. Cameron blinked rapidly, fighting back his own tears. Rachel smiled softly, placing a hand on her nephew's shoulder. Principal Harrison sighed deeply. Maybe I'm being too strict. Mr. Marshall, Ms. Rodriguez, I suggest we officially document your relationship and establish some clear professional guidelines. Lucas can remain in Ms. Rodriguez's class, but all academic matters will be overseen by Ms. Bennett to avoid any appearance of favoritism. That sounds fair, Natalie agreed, feeling a huge weight come off her shoulders. As for Ms. Thompson, the principal continued, I will personally deal with any future attempts to disrupt the school environment. Later that day, as the autumn sun set over Stanford Cameron, Natalie, Lucas, and Rachel walked through the park near the school. Lucas ran ahead, making his cardboard Trex hunt for fallen leaves. Thank you, Cameron said softly to his sister, for always being here for us. Rebecca would be proud, Rachel replied, watching Lucas play. Of all of you. Natalie intertwined her fingers with Cameron's, feeling the strength and comfort of his presence. The dark clouds that threatened a storm began to dissipate, as did the shadows that had hung over their relationship. We still have a long way to go, she murmured. Yes, Cameron agreed, squeezing her hand gently. But now we can walk it together in the light of day. Christmas lights were already beginning to appear on the houses of Stanford when the first snowflake of the year fell. It was early December, and 3 months had passed since the confrontation with Diana at school. Lucas was engaged in his new science project, this time on marine paleontology, while Cameron and Natalie had found their rhythm as a couple. Dad, can we invite Ms. Natalie, to decorate our Christmas tree this year? Lucas asked over Saturday breakfast, his mouth full of pancakes. Cameron exchanged a glance with Rachel, who was preparing another round of coffee. Since the incident at school, they had been careful to keep things progressing slowly, but Lucas seemed to have plans of his own. I don't know, champ. We need to see if she doesn't have other plans with her family, Cameron replied cautiously. Actually, Rachel interjected, I hear her parents are traveling this year. Something about a Caribbean cruise. Lucas brightened. So she'll be alone at Christmas, that's sad. Can we invite her to spend Christmas with us too? Lucas's innocent question triggered a series of memories in Cameron. The first Christmas after Rebecca's death had been devastating. The second with Diana had been forced and uncomfortable. Now 3 years later, his son was naturally suggesting including Natalie in one of the family's most meaningful traditions. I'll talk to her, Cameron promised, feeling his heart race at the possibility. That afternoon, as they walked through Cove Island Park with Lucas running ahead to feed the ducks, Cameron held Natalie's hand a little tighter. Lucas wants you to help us decorate the Christmas tree, he said, watching her reaction. Natalie stopped walking, her eyes meeting his. Cameron, you don't have to answer now, he hurried to say. I know it's a big step, especially considering Rebecca, she added softly. Yes? No. He ran his free hand through his hair, frustrated by his own hesitation. Natalie, over the last few months, you've brought something back into our lives that I didn't even know was missing. It's not about replacing anyone. It's about creating something new, something of our own. Natalie smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Do you know what Lucas said to me the other day in class? He was drawing his family for a project, and he included everyone, you, me, Rachel, Rebecca in the sky, even that goldfish that died last month. When I asked him why he had drawn so many people, he said, because family is like those boxes of colored pencils. The more colors, the prettier the drawing. Cameron felt his heart expand at his son's words. He's wiser than all of us put together, isn't he? Definitely, she laughed, wiping away a tear. And yes, I'd love to help with the Christmas tree. Actually, she hesitated for a moment. I have something for you. I was saving it for the right moment. The next day, Natalie showed up at the Marshall's house carrying an old wooden box. Lucas, still in his pajamas, ran over to hug her. What's in the box? He asked, jumping up and down with curiosity. Well, Natalie sat down on the sofa, patting the space next to her for Lucas to join her. When I was your age and lost my mother, my teacher taught me something very special about Christmas. She showed me that we can keep the people we love alive in our hearts through traditions. She carefully opened the box, revealing a collection of antique ornaments. These were my mother's. Every year, she would buy a new ornament that represented something important that had happened. After she left, I continued the tradition. Lucas gently picked up a small glass dinosaur. It's a Trex, yes, Natalie smiled, looking at Cameron. I bought it this year to remember how I met a very special family through a science project on dinosaurs. Cameron felt his throat tighten with emotion. Rachel, who was watching from the doorway, discreetly wiped away a few tears. Can we start our own tradition? Lucas asked excitedly. Do we each choose a special ornament every year? I think that's a wonderful idea, Cameron replied, sitting down next to Natalie and taking her hand. Over the next few hours, they decorated the tree together, with Lucas telling stories about each antique Marshall family ornament while Natalie shared the memories behind each piece in her collection. Rachel documented everything with her camera, capturing moments that told a story of healing, love, and new beginnings. When night fell and Lucas finally fell asleep exhausted, but happy, Cameron and Natalie sat on the sofa admiring the sparkling tree. "I have something to show you," Cameron said, getting up and going to a desk drawer. He returned with an envelope. "What's this?" "Diana signed the divorce papers yesterday. It's officially finalized." Natalie absorbed the information in silence for a moment. "How are you feeling?" Free answered honestly. "And a little scared, but mostly hopeful." He turned to face her fully. "Natalie, I know we're still building this thing between us, finding our way, but I want you to know that I'm no longer looking to the past. I'm here now with you." She smiled that smile that always made your heart leap. "I'm here too, and I don't intend to go anywhere." From upstairs came Lucas' sleepy voice. "Dad, Natalie, can we make hot chocolate?" They laughed together, the intimate moment broken by the sweet reality of family life. "I'll make it," Natalie offered, getting up. As she moved around the kitchen with a familiarity that came from months of shared dinners and study afternoons with Lucas, Cameron observed the scene with a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. On the Christmas tree, the little glass Trex shone among ornaments old and new, a perfect symbol of how the past and present could coexist harmoniously, creating a future full of possibilities.